wouldn't go to say that I'm a great entrepreneur. I want to be, right? I think that's a study forever to be that. But I do fit that model. I've certainly failed more than I've succeeded. The difference is getting back up when you're knocked down and trying again, not stopping. I tell my employees all the time, you're going to cost me money, but not the same amount of money I've cost myself. I've cost myself a great amount of money. I have absolutely failed, but getting back up from that and going again, so many lessons are learned in failure. Most of my lessons are learned in failure, right? So getting it right the first time, so that's awesome, but I got it right. I didn't learn anything. Failing from failure is where so many of my lessons were learned. So
this is good stuff. And so since we've already started rolling, let me just say this afternoon, my name's Rick Young. We are here with Rob Summerall, and we are conducting an interview for the course at Liberty University of History of American Entrepreneurship. And we are thankful for his time and for Heather coming and to take this video for us. And I thank Matha for arranging it. And so just want to give Rob an opportunity to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about his business, Tico Graphics, and then we will begin the questions.
thank you. Rob Summerall, owner of Tico Graphics Incorporated. We'll be going into our 20th year next year, and really excited about that. The core competency of our business is screen printing and embroidery of apparel for local markets, the government market, which we have a good long contract with them, so we're proud of that. And online retail for a company called Zulily, which focuses on women's clothing, among other things, and received a lot of growth from there. I have been an entrepreneur for greater than 44, so let's say I started at 19, so that's going to put me at 25 years. And always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Had one little temporary stint where I considered joining the military, and even at that point I wanted to join as an administrative officer and get out after 4 years and start some form of business. In the beginning I did not know what business I wanted to start. I just knew there was something inside me that it was business. I never really didn't have that focus. So a lot of us have those trials in our early years is, what do I want to do? I've kind of always known. So I just didn't know what until a few years after, 1 year after graduating from high school, or actually a few, because I'd started other businesses, and got into a concept. Industrial psychology was a part of a course I took in college, time motion study, and oddly that kind of got me into manufacturing. I love the concept of setting up assembly lines, and t-shirts in this area were not being done. I just went for it and fell in love with it. So that's kind of a little bit of my start into it.
Very good. How many employees do you have?
Currently, we have 14 employees. My wife and I make that 16 because we're definitely employed. So.
Okay, well, if you like, we'll begin. I'm going to just
Certainly.
ask you some questions, and just begin with the first one. And John D. Rockefeller, on the subject of motivation, was quoted as saying, "Mere money getting has never been my goal. I had an ambition to build." So what was your motivation to begin a business, and what inspires you to continue even now?
I grew up with very modest means. As I shared with Mantha the other day, I was a foster kid. That's actually when life started getting better. I had a drive in me. I don't know where that drive comes from sometimes, right? Maybe some of us have, maybe all of us have it. But I had a drive in me. Did I want prosperity? Certainly I did. And maybe in the beginning that was perhaps the strongest pursuit I had. But I don't know that that's really where my entrepreneurial endeavor really began. I think that was just a kid wanting to get out of a plighted situation, prove himself to those around him that he would not be a statistic, that he would not let his past define his future. I had something to prove. When I approached business with that mindset, I had a great deal of motivation, but I didn't really meet the levels of success. there was a point in my mid to late 20s where I guess a young guy becomes a man, and I realized that I didn't have anything to prove to anybody but myself. And I think that's at the point where my business endeavors started to change. For probably the first time, there's been a few pivotal changes in my philosophy to business, but I think that was the first one that initialized. I mean, it goes to what Mr. Rockefeller stated here, which it was no longer about the money pursuits, because I realized, and I think I'd even been told, and it sunk into me, that if you're doing it just for money, you may not be doing it for the right reason. It starts getting into a philosophy of putting the customer first, meeting the customer's needs. And those original business pursuits, the customer was just almost something that I had to conquer, right? Something that maybe even gotten in the way, right? Until I realized, no, they're the goal. They are the goal. They're the reason. And to develop that customer experience was essential to it. So no longer was the customer and I at adversity with one another. We were on the same page. They had a want, a need to be fulfilled, and it was my job to fulfill that. I think some of that drive was even spurred further, and I tell people often that my pursuit and endeavor to provide great customer service comes from the dysfunction that I had as being kind of an abused child. I was always trying to make everybody happy. So I just took that adversity, flipped it around, and brought it into it. So again, like Mr. Rockefeller says, the pursuit of money is not the path. It may have been what started me, but it wasn't until that change in me, that realization to what he says right there is correct. It's about some of that building the better mousetrap, trying to make it better. And I've reached that prosperous level in my life. Quite frankly, if we stayed at the level we're at right now, I would have good prosperity. But it's no longer about that at all. It's about making it. It's about that customer experience and being the best at that, being the best at my endeavor, which happens to be screen printing and embroidery. Being the best at that customer service, and something that Mary and I, who works with me, of course, as my wife, have learned to spread to our employees about making their lives better, taking care of them, building that team. And that is so much fun. So much fun building that team, having that rewarding customer experience and building to that, and fostering a mindset in those employees that they want to do the same thing and that they'll be rewarded for it. Rewarded for thinking like owners, not thinking like employees. Just today in a meeting right before this one, we told them next year the word employee will be forbidden at TECO. You're a team member. Don't come in here thinking like an employee, because you're not an employee. And if you think like that, you're thinking wrong. And that's what I'm building. That almost, maybe it has everything to do with business, but it has nothing to do about gaining prosperity, because I will seek those goals at a loss of revenue. Because I know in the end, if I follow those pursuits, if I work with that inside my mind, I will be rewarded. I will be rewarded with prosperity because I'm doing what's right. If I follow that, money will follow. So no longer is money the pursuit, while it may have been that in the beginning.
So following that golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them to do unto you. That's a
Yeah, I guess all that does sum up into that. It does, and the awareness of that, whether I define it so simply or with as many words as I usually speak with. But you're absolutely right.
That's wonderful. In the course of, in this course, entrepreneur is defined as an individual willing to take a risk for personal gain in the economic realm. What's some of the risks you've taken, and what's some of the sacrifices you've made?
Oh, goodness. The risk of going into business is the first one, right? You put all of yourself out there. As a person, again, going back to not having prosperity, there were no deep pockets to fund me. That is literally I bootstrapped off of credit cards, which for that matter I probably shouldn't have even had, right? So you start out that way. The risk of losing it all. When you start out there, right, I'm not utilizing somebody else's capital, so therefore I risk losing everything I've got. And goodness, that's one thing as a single man, but with a family, right? There's so much more. So first, going into business, that's the risk. It's a measured risk if you plan it correctly. I feel that I planned it correctly. I did not go in naively. I did the business plan. I did the competitive analysis, the SWOT analysis, those things that you have to do to measure your risk, but yet it's still a risk. The outside endeavors I've taken while being in business, other businesses that I have purchased and sold in the times that I've had TECO were risk. Sometimes making the advancement. When we left the old building, as we came into here last year, that again was a point at which I was making plenty. And so I put it all in to expand, again, largely for my employees. I knew that I had reached a point that I was satisfied, but perhaps they weren't. You know, it's grow or go out of business. And so I think the biggest risk is going into business. I take some risk every day. They're more and more measured. The longer you're in business, you learn to measure your risk better, and the easier it is to measure. You've got your back statistical data by which you make decisions on. So from the true financial risk for the gain, every day I take those risks, some greater than others. Yeah.
You know, and that goes to the, next question that says, even the greatest entrepreneurs have had setbacks or failures. What are some of the obstacles you've overcome? And how
Well,
encountered and overcome?
you know, in realms to just this business, and I could probably spin off into some other endeavors in the conversation, walking in to a business, again, without those deep pockets, you're overcoming the number one obstacle that businesses face, being undercapitalized. That is the number one reason for business failure is capitalization, the lack thereof. So that obstacle really took years to overcome. Literally living out of the account, making my vehicle payments out of the account, eating out of the account, right? Any little extra money. It wasn't a paycheck. It was, what can I take this week?
Mm-hmm.
You know, how much can I afford to take this week and survive through the next week and make sure what few employees I had at that time get taken care of. That's one obstacle. And probably, again, as we know through statistical data in business, the biggest obstacle. Not having support many times, right? Family support, learning business as you go, right? Because I had a 2-year AS degree in business administration, but that did not prepare me for the real world of business. Perhaps a bachelor's would have given me some more background, but I had to overcome the lack of a lot of knowledge. You know, my college, I guess, was the boot camp of life, if you will, the boot camp of business. Expensive mistakes throughout business, learning how to work with people, the employees, the customers, learning how to jump into an industry that I knew nothing about. I had never printed a shirt before I went into business. I mean, one day I'm a guy working at a fast food restaurant in college. The next day I'm a guy with a press, a flash unit, and a dryer, you know, knocking out shirts, trying to sell. I remember handing that first box over the counter to a customer, trembling, hoping they wouldn't catch all the mess ups, and sure enough they did, and picked every shirt out one at a time and said, I'll buy this one, I won't buy this one, I'll buy this one, and just like feeling crushed on the inside, trembling, to the point now to where even if there's a little flaw in a shirt, I push the box across the counter, it's a great job, you're going to love it, have a good day, you know, because I saw the mistakes that they would never see, because you're in your craft, if you will, and you see those mistakes. But I have to say the biggest obstacle was going into it overcapitalized, because it took me so many years to get to where I could start to take a check, then, you know, take a bigger check and then pay for things and grow, and take a check and still grow the business and still have retained earnings at the end of it. And then have that security of going and sleep at night and knowing that I have families working for me and their children are gonna get there. Capitalization was probably my biggest challenge in learning the knowledge, how to do business.
Very good. You know, it said, you were talking about drive, and you talked about knowing your customers and things. It says sometimes in our text that many entrepreneurs have almost like a sixth sense of being able to determine the direction of market or anticipate what the market's going to go to in the future.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you do to determine your direction or to feel the market out? What do you do to kind of see where to go, so to speak?
Well, number one, you have to read, right? And I know it sounds cliche, but you have to read. I guess you could YouTube. I do that too. I go to webinars now. That's the new thing. Learning about your industry. Every industry has trade magazines. Read that. Take it. Analyze it. Where do you fit in to that? Join trade associations within your industry. Every industry has one. Make yourself aware of the trends. Look outside of your industry. See what's going on outside of your world, right? So many times I've been able to take, like I mentioned earlier, I worked at fast food, their fast food has a very great industrial psychology, a flow to things, right? I've used that many times on my production line. How close you stand to a machine is in proximity to another machine to reduce down the number of steps you take to get the shirt from here to there. How to touch things only once. So you go outside of your industry, bringing that back to how we go into trends that will make us survive into the future. We know there's a lot of what we call in our industry online intrusion. It's not the local competitor that's going to get me, it's the ones online outside of my area that can draw from my customers. It's seeing those things, measuring the risk of jumping into those things, like your former question, and going into it, not fearing your competition, not fearing that intrusion, seeing your way through it. Most of that comes from reading, being on top of things, keeping up with current affairs within your industry, outside of your industry, watching your competitors, mimicking some of their things, some of their processes, constantly sharpening your machine, not being complacent, right? Understanding that if you're not growing, you're going out of business. Complacency will cripple you. That same complacency is what will not make you strive to learn more about your industry. Never stop learning might be what I could refine this all down to. Never stop learning, never stop reading, never be complacent.
And my next question kind of goes along with that. What do you do to promote your business? In other words, advertising or social media, or what's the trick for you?
I think we still learn that some, right? Some of that as we're looking out there into the competitors, what they're doing to grow, right? Look, they've created the will of the industry. They're bigger. They're rolling, right? They say mimicry, I believe is the terminology, is the greatest form of flattery, or copying is the greatest form of flattery. I hope I'm flattering them because I copy them where I can. You have to take some risk. You have to do some things out of the box, unorthodox. You can't copy everything they do. We're a different entity. They have different economies of scale, different powers, different resources that we will likely never have access to. So in that realm, we get outside of the norm. Social media, digital media, seems to be the thing of now and the recent past, and definitely of the future. So we are trending more and more to online sales. One of the things that we're doing is creating online stores for different customers, say at a banking customer. Having identified that a miserable thing to do sometimes is to come to our shop, take time. You have to take time to come to our shop out of your schedule, especially as a small business, develop a logo, get back and forth, and order the shirts, and keep up with that within your own human resources department, or whoever that person at the front desk is. Creating market disruption to the best that we can in our area. Trying to outspend the big boys who will only spend so much in each market. Mm-hmm. If they want to spend 5%, maybe we spend 6% to be over the top of them, but in a smaller area, mm-hmm. right? Trying to beat them out. So I think it goes back to the same thing. That question can be almost answered the same way. Always learning, always looking to what the competition's doing, looking at how we could do that better, how we could rise above them in a smaller geographical area, and to the part of social media, very much moving out into that. All digital marketing, most certainly.
Good deal. Good deal. What's your strength in the business? Is it technical expertise? Is it product expertise? Are you adept in marketing? What do you consider your strengths in the business and the weakness in the business?
So, I have a grasp on marketing. That's something I love. It comes natural. I will take the risk, right? At the end of the day, when a risk is to be taken, I will be the one to pull the trigger on that. So the lack of fear in that realm of taking risk would be a strength. Marketing would be a strength. Inspiration is probably my greatest strength. Inspiring the team to do what they need to do, to understand the mission, what our core values are. Two of the primary core values we have are family and community. Getting them to buy into that. Getting them to understand, as I said earlier, that they are not employees. They are team members. To think like team members, to think like owners, and to know that they'll be rewarded on the other side of that. To sell that mission, to inspire them. Weaknesses. I'm not the manager I would like to be. My wife does that. She's a greater manager. If I can't make you want to do it, I'm done. She's going to make you do it or make you leave. So management is a weakness. Recognizing that I have a weakness is yet another strength.
That's right.
There is nobody that we have in a particular position of this business anymore. It didn't used to be this way. I started out being the screen printer, the salesman, the everything. I did it all. It was a one-man shop. But as we grew, I have slowly, and as of recent, quickly, been replaced by people in each department that are better than me. I want them to be better than me. Therefore, the strength in that is recognizing my weaknesses, accepting my weaknesses, not allowing my ego to get in the way, and putting the proper people in place. And I have a simple formula for that. I have to give you the authority to do the job, give you the tools to do that job, and stay out of your way so you can do that job. Hit me up when you need some help. Not going to do anything. I'm going to inspire you to do it. I'm going to teach you that you can do it, give you the tools to do it, and get out of your way so that you can do it. So, got some strengths there, got some weaknesses. The biggest weakness is management. So,
But you got a good partner for the management.
I've got a good partner and I have a good leadership team. They're young, they're hungry, and they're motivated because we treat them right. Again, the part about accepting your weaknesses and getting people in place and getting your ego out of the way, that to me has proven to be the most critical. I see that fail. It's, do I wish to be, and I want to say it was the Harvard Business of School that I got this from in a reading, do I wish to be rich or do I wish to be king, right? Now that was set up for a lot of your online companies, the Steve Jobses of the world and things of that nature, who, if you look in there, Steve Wozniak gives a great example of this. He wished for his prosperity. He didn't want to be king. He became a high-ranking engineer within the company, while Steve Jobs basically ran the company. Here he was in a lowly position, but he was half owner of this large entity, right? He realized that's not what he wanted to do. So I don't have to be king, right? I don't have to be king to prosper. I have to be smart enough to get out of the way so that they can help me to prosper and reward them in the process.
That's a good word. That's a good word. I'm going to read this next question. It's fairly lengthy. It says, some writers equate entrepreneurship as to mere spirituality. That is, that an entrepreneur seeks to fulfill the needs of others through a product or a service. That's willing to sacrifice to accomplish these goals. That's work for low or no pay.
Right.
To get the business started. Is long-suffering, the commitment to the task, frugal, works long hours, willing to persevere even after failure. Is a good steward, managing resources in a manner that is efficient in producing a given product, that is eliminating waste. And from what you've said already, you've related that you look at it in this sense, that it is almost a humbling task to work for the customer. And,
it is.
So just relate a little bit how this experience, your experience, compares to this statement.
And I've touched on some of it, but I mean, I would say been there, done all of that. Going back to the beginning, the long hours, the sacrifice of no pay. I think it took me 6 years, literally, before I started to see any real return. Those I can sleep tonight. And even after that, long hours continued to be a part of it. And only at the point that I met at what would soon be that time would soon be my wife, did the hours start reducing, right? And then kids, and they start reducing. But I had built into that at that point. So that's when the slow hours started. And I admit, I don't give it all the hours. I never stopped thinking about it, right? But I'm not here all the hours that I was back in the beginning. Again, I've inspired others and given them the power to do some of that. But you bring up kind of the spiritual aspect of it, and I'll approach that in this way. I go back to that upbringing where that dysfunctional past led me on a path to just always be looking to make people happy, right? And that's where I brought up in the very beginning, a dysfunction, right? What I could sit there and say, I could succumb to the whole, my past and everything of that nature, or I could take this thing that usually crumbles people and I could say, wait a minute, I can take that and make that a good thing. And there are other aspects of my past that I took and made a good thing. And that striving to make everybody happy. The employees. I mean, look at it. That's what I'm saying, right? I want to have that good customer experience. I want to make them happy. That's deep-seated. I want my employees to be happy. That's deep-seated. There's reward on the flip side of that. Again, it's doing the right thing. Treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. I think it's close to what you said. I've overcome those obstacles of long hours, limited pay to no pay, putting my employees above myself. There was a couple of years of that. It's like, hey, I'll pay y'all. I live out of the company, but I'll pay y'all. You'll get a paycheck. That reckoning, that epiphany I had, as I mentioned, in my mid to late 20s, to where I started to really change as an individual, a person, after having failed a couple of times and had really, at that point in time, been on some hard times. I was at a low. And once that kind of, that flip switched, it took all that energy and made it still kind of going down a path, but with just maybe a little better pursuit of business, the business approach. And I'd like to say smarter. That's yet to be determined. But yeah, that's how I answer that question. Some of it I touched on, but been there, done all of that. Yeah.
Good deal. I'm going to just change these last 2 or 3 questions, just kind of changes gears. How has government, environmental regulation, taxes, those type of things, how does that affect you?
It does have an effect. I have a little bit of political background. On this thread of conversation, in business, and when I volunteered in politics, that youthful optimism you have that you'll change the world and you can change the world. And I tackled that, right? And I'm not bitter, but I realize that the impact, and some of us can have great impact on the world, and that's fantastic. Not all of us can. I realized somewhere in there the distance I was willing to go down that road of politics and stuff, and I could have not the great impact that some others could have. That wasn't the path for me. But I carry that over into business, and I realized that I couldn't change the world in that front when I was dabbling in politics. I'm not going to change the world and can't have great effect over it. In the political arena, when it comes to taxes and stuff, I can vote, right? I can mildly inspire my people, say, hey, look, this is what we're facing here. This political arena that we're in right now may not be favorable, or maybe it is favorable. Go this direction, go that direction. But in reality, it all comes down to this. In answering to that question, I've learned that I don't have a great deal of impact. I can't affect a great deal of change. I'm too small for that. So in a lot of ways, while I'm aware of it, while I circumnavigate through it, well, that's kind of what I do. I jitter around it. I feel that most small businesses come to a point where they can be angry and fight the system and try to buck it in some way, but it's going to be what it's going to be to a certain point. I have to learn to roll with it. I have to learn to be agile as a small business and use actually my small size to move around it. Do they have an effect? Yes. But as a small business versus large businesses out there in the world, I have a great opportunity to grow, right? I'm growing when they're suffering the consequences of some political impact, some tax, because of their size. They say large business has it beautifully. No, they're slow to react.
Mm-hmm.
They can't move so quick. They're not agile. They can't get through the system. Sure, they can throw attorneys at a challenge. They can throw a lot of marketing at it. They got a lot of dollars to throw at a challenge, but they can't circumnavigate through it quite as well as we can if you choose to have the perspective that you can do that, right? It's a choice. Just change the way you see it. Change the way you think. Don't be stuck, oh, they're throwing a tax at me, man. Just get through it. Just get through it. Find a way around it. Find a way to work through it. Don't look at big businesses. They've got it easy. Look at it. They're struggling. That's kind of a better perspective, right? I think they're hurting a little bit. Yeah, so the effect, I can't change it. Just circumnavigate through it. I vote. It'll do what it'll do.
That's right. Okay, so let me just kind of reword that next question then. So, with having said that, do you think that there is would you say that government regulation is good or bad? Would you like to see less of it, more of it? Is there something that, if you had the perfect world, that you would just say, hey, this would disappear, everything would be great?
There's room for regulation. If it's common sense regulation, I think that's limited. So when in doubt, drop the regulation, right? I'm not a fan of regulations, but I think some are good. The government starts out sometimes with great intentions. They just never end up that way. Or seldom.
Absolutely.
Should I say seldom?
Seldom.
Never is a strong word. So some regulation. We know that there's things down the pipeline for us from California, from the West Coast, moving this way are environmental regulations. I think we should all be good stewards of the environment. We try to be, but the impact that we see coming as to what types of inks we'll use and how we'll dispose of things will have a financial effect on us. Now, what have we done? The new equipment that we've purchased is already prepared for the new chemicals and inks coming our way. Those have to work hand in hand. So we're preparing for it. Again, I'm circumnavigating. I know it's coming. It's no big surprise. It's like a slow train coming down the track. You stop and you figure out what you're going to do before you cross. So we're continuing to do the same philosophy as we did in the previous question. I think some of that question goes into, well, no, that's the next question. Forgive me. But that's how we overcome that. It's kind of the same thing. We're just aware of it and kind of work around it.
Well, going on then to the next question, global expansion.
Mm-hmm.
Every day the world gets to be a smaller place for us, technology and information.
Right.
What do you think that's going to do for small business in the United States?
This one's a little different for me. When I wrote my business plan, it was around the time that NAFTA was kind of coming into play. And a part of my business plan focused on that. Now, the good was what we saw as larger and larger shops were leaving the country and going overseas. What was the opportunity? The opportunity in that is they were leaving those kind of smaller, middle-sized contracts that needed faster turnaround time. And when I say smaller, you're thousands, right? Those smaller contracts, they couldn't turn around. You know, somebody's ordering a million shirts, a Verizon contract we just looked at. They know that they're going to be months in the works of getting that contract, 6 months down the road. Some government contracts that we look at that are out of our reach, it's 180 days for delivery, right? They know that. Those contracts are so large. Well, they can be overseas, work at those smaller rates of labor, and fulfill that and get it all done on time. But the guy down the street who wants 1,000 shirts, he's not waiting 6 months. He wants 1,000 shirts, and he wants them within a relatively decent amount of time, a rate of return. They left all that on the table when they started shifting and doing that. Now, that's shifting around a little bit, right? So delivery times are faster, things are going through the web. Understand the internet wasn't quite the thing then that it is now. And how it greases the wheels of this world economy. We are seeing things turn around out of, say, China, really in a matter of a few weeks, right? They're knocking it out. It's all happening online. Mm-hmm. That has a little bit of an effect. That's something that we have to concern ourselves with. Of course, you know, we're embracing it, like the Amazons of the world, right? You know, so some of their profitability comes from world round, and they're able to bring that in. They're competing within our industry. There's a lot of, again, I brought it up in the beginning, online intrusion. That, coupled with the global economy, does create a challenge for us. So, you know, what we're looking to do is jump on the Amazon bandwagon. The old adage, if you can't beat them, join them, right? We do see a little more of an impact from there. We still remain agile. We are aware of it. We can't be paralyzed by it. We have to function through it, but that one has a little more of an effect. It's harder to circumnavigate around that. We're still going to do it. We still can do it because we're aware of it. We're cognizant of what the possibilities are. And again, that SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, that's more of a threat to us. So we're paying a little more attention to that one.
Thank you, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could probably teach a business course.
It'd be interesting.
You're very interesting to listen to talk. You're very articulate. You're very knowledgeable. Gosh, it's just been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Sitting here with you and listening to you talk, and I thank you for doing this interview. Mm-hmm. And I wish you well in your business, and Merry Christmas.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity to share, and hope people get some good out of it.
Okay. Sure they will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Right.